would like to see my methods, some of my methods like battle tested. I would really like to not just see and pick up my workflow, and also like see like can they come up with some their own solutions in terms of that, because there's always room for interpretation. This was also the goal of the course. If you look all these possibilities, even when things are quite restricted, you have immense amount of possibilities on your disposal. So I would like them, like to see them using those possibilities, because I too much often see like the clones of the already done work, so I don't find that much as exciting in that sense. And I truly believe that every person has their own voice, and yeah, like Fusion is like a perfect playground for that.
Please welcome designer and brand new Learn Squared instructor Ivan Santic to this episode of the Learn Squared podcast. Creating under the brand of Mother, Ivan's unique perspective on design stems from many places that has seen him express his expertise on hard surface design to various subject matters across industries covering entertainment, consumer, automotive, defense, aeronautics, and many more. And now Ivan is at Learn Squared with 2 new courses, Concept Design in Fusion and Fusion Basics, which you can sign up for now by heading to learnsquared.com. And if you're doing so as soon as this episode has dropped, then there's a juicy discount waiting for you. And in this episode, Ivan reveals what you can learn from these courses that feature his beloved tool, Autodesk Fusion, and why he chose a dropship as the perfect subject matter to teach design, his process, and how far you can push it. So let's jump in and hear more from Ivan himself about this, his journey, perspectives on design, and much more. Let's go. Cool, let's go. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Learn Squared podcast, and delighted to welcome our amazing guest today and new Learn Squared instructor, Ivan Santic. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me, man.
Super excited. We've already had some amazing conversations before we've even pretty much hit record. So looking forward to letting viewers and listeners catch some of that already that we've been chatting about. But yeah, excited to have you on. Obviously, not only to talk about your designs and your artwork and your journey, but also the couple of Learn Squared courses that you've been cooking up with us over the last couple of years. But before we get into all of that good stuff, if you wouldn't mind letting everybody know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I'm a Mother Design Studio founder, and I'm usually like recognized online by this Mother handle, and this is like originates from 2K almost. So I'm like a long time in the game, and through this kind of timeline, I was also like changing a couple of different how I say you kind of evaluate to the level you are. So, and because the internet is changing and you are changing as the internet and the technology is changing as well. So this is also interesting. So at the time I was like, I don't know, like when I was starting, like it was all about ZBrush, still is, but the ZBrush also like changed the owner. Some things changed the dynamics of that company, and the software itself also changed. And but I was always kind of interested in innovation side of things. For example, with ZBrush, I was like interested in hard surface, not so much in the sculpting, because innovation, like it's like when you find that new ways to do even the same things, but because you will get different results in that sense, so they become new things in that way. And using ZBrush also, I already knew, like at the time I wasn't like that expert on anatomy, and why to, I mean, I wouldn't say compete, but why go there? Because I wasn't going for example, for Marvel or any of those. So why to like deal with the stuff? Because you should do things you like to do in life. So if in that way, like I found some new ways. So my models in ZBrush, even still to this time, are quite polished in terms of that. Like for example, I did this kind of baby Android design, which was also crazy thing. Like maybe, I don't know, like 15 years, which got like a top row as well. So not so many people know. I even had to remind myself of that time, because that time is kind of, like tears in the rain, kind of lost. but yeah, that's pretty much it. It was definitely a journey and still is. Now, like in CAD, still doing the same thing, but on different platform, like on Fusion, for example,
Mm.
as we were doing the course in Fusion, and also like the full pipeline covering Blender as well, and I even
Yeah.
went a little bit into kind of visual effects side of things, which is not really common for the hard surface
Yeah.
molders, designers, and so on. Like they kind of dwell on side of these things, and yeah.
So just let everybody know, at the time this episode airs, either the course will be able to pre-order a nice juicy discount, or you can actually grab it now. So Ivan's got two courses, Fusion Basics and Concept Design in Fusion. If you do grab Concept Design in Fusion, you get Fusion Basics already included. But if you just want to get used to Fusion and understand it, then grab the Fusion Basics course. But looking at your journey and going all the way back, seeing the course that you've cooked up for us now, was this part of the plan? Did you see yourself doing something like this from way back when you started?
Um, yeah, that's really a tough question in a sense, like how much you can see into the future.
Mm.
And this is also the subject I kind of raised myself, not just to like talk about myself, but also in terms of the audience, you know.
Mm.
Like just the clients, like they're not really interested, like I mean, they're interested in you and working with you in a sense, but they're also interested in solving their problem, like simply put, you know. And we kind of forget that, you know. So
Mm.
your portfolio and stuff you're coming in, like it's a big introduction for sure, but it's not
Mm.
going to revolve around that. So I when I was doing this kind of course, I was kind of trying to think like how to put all the philosophy about design, forms in general, and even art in a sense, even though like I'm not really using the word artist because I like the design because it's kind of the middle ground between the science and the visual side of things, aesthetical kind of point of view. And this is like what makes me kind of also balanced in a
Mm.
sense. I'm not trying to be not to going too much left or go to right. I just want to go like straight forward, keep the balance like
Mm.
in the center of things, because design is also there like to solve products. I mean, solve problems as a products on the
Mm.
markets, so to speak. Yeah.
Just going back to even you mentioned the baby project, and when I was looking at your work as well again, and it's again when it comes to like learn squared stuff, there's multiple ways why we have to look at instructors and students' artwork. But the easiest one is always just to enjoy and geek out what people have created. And then yeah, just seeing the baby project, and I was like, hold on. Then you look at how long ago it was, and then obviously you mentioned it was in ZBrush. It's was it a crazy achievement to kind of achieve that in ZBrush at the time?
It
Because
was also
yeah,
crazy concept as a concept because that
yeah,
all happened before Death Stranding, for example, which is using
mm,
a baby as part of the brand extension.
yes,
It's a big part, like when the Kojima like pulled that off. So yeah, at the time like it was like a little bit weird, even though like I would say that the baby in the Death Stranding is not like Android, you know.
yeah,
And even at the time, I was thinking like to 3D print it out, and yeah, somehow didn't happen. But also that project was interesting from the point of view of like how it was like structured, because like if you look at it's also a tutorial, it's artwork, final design, and tutorial, because I have also like made a little bit little infographics, like if you look how it's kind of circling out with more and more content and more information,
mm-hmm,
and with the baby in the center. So yeah, like that, because I also I'm doing design in general, so maybe I'm modeling a product, but what's the worth of product like if that product is also not presented well? So my clients also quite vary. Some clients just coming in for visualizations, some coming for some different design solutions. So there's not like the same client. So when they ask me like what you're doing, like, and I'm thinking like who's going to be the next client with their like, because I have some contacts, and I talk to many people from the military and defense. So
Mm.
this is another interesting subject. So it's not just entertainment, even though
Mm.
like entertainment design is heavily influenced by military and the industry complex. Like let's put
Yeah.
it like that, you know. So yeah, and like in my approach also to design, even like for example, weapons and military stuff, I'm also trying not to idolize that, you know,
Mm.
because when you look all these specs behind of this kind of weapons, like you're overwhelmed like with the sheer, you know, like damage they can do and so on, and then you kind of forget maybe about some simple stuff like
Mm.
the initial form and the some design language, because also on the course of years, um, them lobbying these products also becoming more and more beautiful.
Mm.
And I early on, when I was doing like some weapon designs of my own, I actually introduced features which are not part of the weapon design in general, and that stuff is now completely normal,
Mm-hmm.
and at the time it wasn't. So I'm quite happy with innovation at that side of things at the time I was doing them, because I
Mm-hmm.
was definitely following some my own hunch instead of just following a trend, because I don't believe in following trends, I believe in
Mm-hmm.
setting trends.
Excellently put. Have you ever followed a trend though? Like, did you learn that by following trends and realize that I don't want to do
I
this,
mean,
or have
my
you always kind of
trend
been
is
aware?
actually following the standard of things.
Right.
Let's put it like that, and that's a healthy trend, isn't it? And
Yes.
also like we all using, for example, in the course, like I'm using the fastener function inside of Fusion, you know, like the
Mm.
screws. Like you are you going to make your own screw, or you're going to pull the standard one because that's
Yeah.
a standard. And then you start thinking like, from when we are using screws, you know, from when this is a standard, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
what's the how to approach the originality of something which is already a standard as well. So this is also like interesting paradigm.
Mm. So you've already mentioned there like a few different kind of avenues you've worked in, obviously entertainment design in the real world as well. What different kind of like industries or disciplines and spaces have you contributed to?
um yeah, I mean, in terms of like you mean in terms of clients, or
Clients, even like, just on your own development as well.
yeah, for example, I believe in getting new projects. My own portfolio was like one of the key features, not usually hiding behind someone else's brand, and this is what I kind of like.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm not advising people to do that, you know, because like some of my portfolio is quite based on of my like on the aura like I would like to build. You know, every person
Mm.
has aura, not so like you're working, and it's still as a field, it's like also work in progress in a sense, you know.
Mm.
Yeah. So through your portfolio, you would like to express what kind of energy you have. On the other side of things, like for example, at the time I was working with Rimats, and Rimats or Rimac, depending on pronunciation, um, at the time was just forming. Even the name of the company wasn't formed. And also, I believe Rimats had this kind of similar philosophy. It was kind of built on his personal dream
Uh-huh.
and become something huge in a transition, and then it's split into multiple companies, and because now we have like automo- autonomous cars, not just Bugatti is also part of the game and so on. Like,
Mm.
but yeah, like when I was working on the animation on the concept one, which was presented in Frankfurt, like that year, uh, that was quite the experience. And then like I was also thinking like, what's my role in that project? Because I'm not automotive designer, but I like I'm, but my work can also revolve around automotive design.
Mm.
So I felt like you're almost like a missing link in between all of this, because I was working in a company at Native Design um, when I was like after my studies in Sweden at Hyper Island, which was like quite endeavor. That was about 2007 in
Mm.
London. I mean, after the Sweden, I was in London native design. but because they were working with these different from audio to automotive kind of field clients. So that was quite interesting to see all this versatility of different projects and different demands as well. And then like you just come there and then like trying to fit into that environment. And also like it's not just the company or mentality of the company, it's also like different fields. And it's also interesting when in what I found about concept design. For example, in these fields, like you have time to finish the project maybe a year or 2 years. In China is even less, but it's still bigger time span. But now, like working on movies, especially if you're a freelancer, you get approached, and then the company maybe had a month to do some design, some craft design for a movie, game, or whatever, and then they didn't really fulfill the requirements of the other company bigger than them who hired them, and then they're coming to you to solve their problem in like in a couple of days. So the team is coming to you as an individual to solve something they couldn't pull off as a team.
Yeah.
But that's kind of realistic scenario, but it's also funny in that sense. But it can be done. It can be done. And then like this is where your portfolio serves as a proof. Can you pull this off? So this is why I kind of think it's a good idea to go with some innovative things. It doesn't matter is it brand behind it or not, because they're like in your portfolio, they're going to look for the solution of their problems.
What is your, I guess, origin story as a designer? Like, when did that journey begin? Was it something that you've always been obsessed about?
Yeah, I think from the early days, like, yeah, my father was always annoyed, like, with my crazy ideas at the time. So, but he came, he had a technical background, so he was actually repairing TVs. So from the early on, like, I was surrounded by the shelves of this hardware equipment, even the technology,
Cool.
this kind of analog tubes from that time, which is now coming back because analog things, in a sense, are coming back because people kind of are a little bit mental, like if you're following the CRT kind of community, like the pricing on this kind of Sony Trinitrons, like can be some certain models can be $1,000, which is crazy. You're buying, the current state of tech
Yeah.
for that money. But yeah, if you want to get that one, like it's that much. So and then like surrounded by all that tech like made me thinking, like, because I couldn't really comprehend, was it aesthetical point of view there or is it technical? Product is the poor product, like everything's kind of merging in that one point in this kind of physical reality. But when you're kind of looking at it, because you're trying to dissect it, because if you're going to replicate this, make something of your own, like you have to understand it first. And then this is where the problems start, because usually people or just engineer or just designer or even an artist. But the key is like to merge this all everything in this kind of one experience inside of the product. So it's also interesting how the handheld market became huge.
Yeah.
Even though like the handheld is basically your mobile phone itself, in a sense, like it can run. This is actually has the way better hardware than most of the handhelds on the market anyhow. But then people, because I'm watching them, like they're buying like unnecessary things in a sense, but they're necessary for them to be happy. So that's completely fine. And then I make connection with for example, with Dieter, which is not like a celebrity in a sense. He's kind of appraised, for the standards he brought into the field. But also, like, he's an interesting person because I think he came there from the architect background, which was also interesting. And then, like at the time, um, Germany was still rebuilding itself after the World War II,
Mm.
It was that time, and then what you have on disposal to do something great. So Brown, in my eyes, kind of started from scratch almost, but
Okay.
maybe they didn't. Maybe they had this kind of firm idea or identity how things could work, should work. So we have like that big influence in the weapon design. Like I don't know, like is it M60 or American machine gun? Is it based on the German? You know, machine gun and things like that. So it looks like a little bit different from the outside. It's a little bit different, stylized more maybe from that point of view. And then also in talking about the aesthetics of the weapon design, for me is also interesting to look at the AK, which also some people say it came from the German kind
Mm.
of assault rifle. Even the assault rifle term is not like clearly defined either, like maybe from the what yeah, that's another political subject, but anyhow, like if we approach the design philosophy or engineering philosophy of a K, like for me, like it's more open mechanism, and with this kind of shit manufacturing and some other stuff from the outside. Like is it stamped metal, or is it like CNC? Like CNCing like is definitely more expensive, and then it's assembled by women, which is also interesting
Mm.
subject, because they have this kind of delicate hands, but this thing looks like a raw machine. And this is
Mm.
how I'm looking at it. I'm not really approaching it just as a weapon or something of that sort. Like I'm just looking as a mechanism, which is like ejecting projectiles at high speed velocity.
Mm.
Like if we break it down to what it actually does, the side effect is that someone is getting killed. But I mean, it depends who is using it in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
because you can hit anything you like. So this is how I'm like looking at the design, even looking at ordinary things with new eyes.
Mm. When did your, because you mentioned that like design philosophy, and we'll get to the course soon. But obviously that's something you speak about heavily in the course, and not only just obviously how to design, but also your thinking on design and how you approach it, and different ways to tackle things as well. But when did your, obviously you mentioned that like it's something that you've been obsessed with for quite a while. But when did you notice, or when did things start to like crystallize and feel like, okay, I have my own design philosophy now?
When I was kind of 25 or something like that,
Right.
but at the time I didn't have the means. So that's another interesting topic you raised, because at the time I didn't have truly the means how to manifest that. At
Okay.
that time, I was already kind of accomplished as a graphic designer because I was changing roles through the time as well. So I started with something which was easier for me to comprehend, and that was graphic design. Uh, at that time, I wanted to be like become a industrial designer in a sense, even though like it's quite unique even still now what I'm doing, but uh, the software was there, but it needed more technical. It was more requiring
Mm.
from you, like to know how to use it.
Right.
Now you can choose. And now people also get a lot of things. You know, just like that. No problem. Like the licenses, actually, pricing of those are down in my sense. But I don't see the results in a sense what they have on disposal, which
Mm.
is also interesting. So for me, Fusion was quite was easy to pick up, even though like I had the learning curve because I had some of my own ideas, and then you have how this software because maybe Fusion wasn't initially wasn't also done to be used in entertainment design. It
Mm.
was more like intended for manufacturing, industrial design. But then the way it works, it got adopted by the community, design community itself. The same thing
Mm-hmm.
happened early on with SketchUp.
Mm.
So, from to my knowledge, from what I could see as an outsider, the early concept design in Avatar were based on SketchUp. because this was the 3D design tools which could be picked up by the ordinary artist almost in a sense. And they didn't use because they were searching for to identify the right form and the design language. It doesn't matter what platform you're using, if you can come to the right solution in a sense. Yeah, and in that way SketchUp was used, but SketchUp is not nowhere as a standard tool in the design community still. So that's kind of funny. I know a couple of people still use SketchUp. And then in SketchUp, I believe we still don't have a bevel. It's some sort of you have freedom to sketch things as you like, and some simplified asset system, which is quite effective. But you are also hitting walls quite early on in many aspects. The things don't look refined, for example, which is the quality I was searching for myself. And then this is why I'm, for example, using Fusion and not using now also people using plasticity on top. But this is also another topic, because the question is usually what's better. It really depends on your workflow, and also I'm using everything in a sense. But Fusion is a big part of my workflow because I'm also relying often on parametric stuff, parametric history. So I like to change things after they happen. And sometimes things have to change because clients come in, or we don't like this, we don't like that. I'm not going to rebuild the whole model. I'm just going to change something in the history if the whole model was already built from that point of view. 90% of artists I know or designers in Fusion, they usually turn off this kind of part of the history. And it's completely fine as well. If you're researching something, if you're playing around, you don't want to be bothered by anything kind of popping up, something broke into the chain, because the history can be also restricting. So I understand that urge. And I could start with that mindset myself, just looking at others. And this is why early on I was talking about innovation. What was innovation for me? Why do I have to do things the same way everyone does? Because I like to find new ways, designing, because I also understand the form you design are based on the applications and the platform you use, as I was giving this example with the SketchUp. So if you search for these designs for Avatar, you'll see that. Exactly. It's not really a secret. They did solve it. Maybe they solve it in practical effects when you were doing these kind of models, and then all these problems were refined. But as myself, maybe it's better to start with a platform where I can have the control from the start to the end, and to get the design and the render from that design on that level, because I'm also looking at the reflections and stuff, how they feel. And this is now this automotive part, this kind of automotive mentality, which people don't usually understand. When they see automotive designers going around the cars and checking all these reflections, because actually they're checking the flow of the surface, which manifests in the reflections the best. So you get zebra lighting on top and some other stuff, so you are following this kind of stripes, and how these kind of stripes are bending around the surface. So yeah, it's definitely mind-bending part of the design. For sure.
I like what you mentioned about, and it's so true. And I've definitely had those conversations myself as well, questions that I've asked, but approaching, especially with tools, which one is better? Well, when in fact that's technically the wrong question to ask. Did you have that question initially as well? Have you ever kind of been that kind of person at one point where you thought which tool is better? And when did that question evolve into understanding which one is best for, I guess, the task that you need to do?
Yeah, also that's because the pen I'm holding is also a tool. So this is more like analog, even though this is the new Wacom, but anyhow, which I like quite a lot. So yeah, a little bit of endorsement for them. that's definitely the pen is your like connection to the hand. Like the hand is your mechanism. This is how you interact with world.
Mm.
So this is why your intelligence in a sense is connected with your hand. Arm is more like a sign of a strength, or you're hitting something. You're not doing anything delicate. You're not operating.
Mm-hmm.
But and this is why people also sketching. So maybe that's the first tool, and then they visualize things through the sketch, and then they find a software or other tool in digital world which will make this kind of full-fledged 3D model. I'm kind of sketching in 3D in a sense, and there are a couple
Mm.
people also know, doing that, but also like going backwards. So I'm also like now sketching quite a lot by the hand, even though like in the course I'm not really doing that because everyone does. I'm covering the workflow which made me what I am anyhow.
Mm.
So I didn't want to like give a wrong impression as well. I also wanted to give some other kind of attitude to the design, because like if you're working on the actual model in the 3D, you're actually changing things as necessary when they happen, and also like you're discovering things in a true 3D dimension. So I'm not working from the side view, top view, or front view. Like I'm working from every side at once.
Mm.
But this is also a problem for many, because if they don't familiar with the app, they get lost because
Mm-hmm.
they have a like a concept design requirement, like what the idea is, and then they're struggling to make it happen inside of the application itself. So this is where things break, and this is why people like to make a sketch. So before, like the workflow was like, as a concept designer, you just sketch something, that's the idea, and then give it away to modeler to make it happen.
Mm.
I would like to point out like the Avatar production, before they made the movie, they actually uh, made how to they innovate the way how this movie is going to be produced to be able to make these movies. So they had to make a new method and work on the new method. And now we have AI kind of, as the new paradigm in terms
Mm.
of like pre-visualizing stuff and so on, make complete solutions. I'm not really concerned about it in a typical sense, and
Mm-hmm.
my kind of approach to that is also quite unique. I'm almost approaching AI as some sort of entity. Like
Mm.
I'm not thinking necessarily this is just some sort of algorithm. For me, it's almost like living, but dead at the
Interesting.
same time.
Mm-hmm.
Like the concept of kind of um, like of AI is also like in religion can be also seen as some sort of antichrist, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely concept designers are looking as an antichrist for
Mostly.
their like for their own goals in life.
Uh-huh.
My problem with AI is that the just like how the sky was pure before, like blue, if you check the wallpaper of the windows, now we have this kind of new sky, like just like Skynet. I mean, I guess that's the one of the connections. Uh, the people who are now born into the world, they are born with the AI already there, operating there, producing results. So this age of innocence is gone in a sense. And I'm so grateful that I came up in a time that AI wasn't a thing. At
Mm.
least I didn't know about it in a typical sense. It only existed as a concept inside of sci-fi, which I'm like the biggest fan. Like
Mm-hmm.
like for me, like sci-fi was like huge inspiration. Even though I'm doing industrial design and the environment, all of that stuff now, like kind of everything kind of this is the team in a sense, where everything can be like where everything is like possibility. So this is why I got kind of influenced by sci-fi early on. Just depending, is it like happening like nearly future or far-fetched future, and so on and so on. And I'm also, in terms of like talking about future, and my habit jumping around the subjects before making the full
Please do. This is all
circle,
good. This is all good.
uh, because this is how my mind works as well. And in a sense, I'm not hiding that. I think that's also a good thing. like to point out to maybe to the audience, because we are not just doing anymore one thing. We are doing multiple things at once, and you
Mhm.
have to have some stability, understanding how they like operate and how to balance them out, just like an image, you know.
Mhm.
So this is maybe well, like making full circle in sketch. Maybe you start just with one color before you get the some understanding of the shape and the form and perspective, and then like you introduce colors later on instead of like overwhelming your brain with everything, because the color is like vibration of light, different vibrations of light, and it's not just what you see in a sense. This is how
Mhm.
you think about it because it's natural, but when you dissect it, it becomes completely something else. And this is, I believe, how Cameron is approaching things. You know, like putting new light on things, and as well. Especially, it's interesting in 2007 or what year the first Avatar was released. It was
I
quite,
think it's 9 officially came out, but obviously they're
yeah.
developing it many, many years before that.
And then at that time, he didn't really have any competition at
Yes.
all. He was competing with himself because he was that good, you know. So I'm not even looking at him as director. I'm actually thinking that Cameron is a designer of things, you know, like the Wizard of Oz in a sense.
It
But I'm not
definitely
I'm
is.
not going to celebrate him like so. I would like to work with him in that sense. Like it's not about that. I think it's about understanding of psychology and look at that person, what that person is, and from what it came from. So he was working on these sets. So he started from the lowest position almost, and then that became a big part of his success later on, because I don't know, I'm taking him as example not because he's famous, because he understands the pipeline,
Mm.
and he changed different pipelines and he made a new pipeline as well with Avatar. So I'm not talking about Avatar at all in that sense. Like so this is military industrial complex with the story for me, you know,
Mm.
and Indians and so on. So this story was told a couple of times already. So what's the innovation, you know?
Mm.
It's immersion actually. It's immersion, uh, and then you get some understanding of that world, what world can be. But this world is completely based on our reality of things, and it's also like inverted, because the colors we are seeing, these colors actually kind of belong to the tropical marine world.
Mm.
So we already have alien world here without really understanding, because we are not so much familiar with that, because we are not diving, so we dependent on the oxygen and so on.
Mm.
And yeah, so this is what I'm saying, putting a new light on things.
The James Cameron reference is a very interesting one because that's something that I've observed too. Like, I'm sure obviously on his business card or everyone refers to him as a film director, but when you look at his CV and a lot of things that he's done and had influence on, and even things that he's actually like invented or helped to invent and pushed along, like there's clearly a lot more dimension to him. Um, and he clearly knows his stuff and he takes the time to learn his stuff. And looking at the course and obviously conversations with yourself, you're definitely somebody who also is clearly interested in, but likes to decode a lot of the stuff that's around him. That's from my perception. And also how you talk about things in the course as well. Like, there's definitely like a lot of topics that you touch upon, and it's quite interesting when I guess when students get into it, it's like, what am I going to design today? But then you kind of walk away with a lot more thinking, a lot more introspection on that as well. Is that something that you and obviously you mentioned as well that you like, you bounce around in terms of like how you think and how you create. That's something that I can relate to because it kind of works the same way for me as well. Is that something that kind of gets in your way? Does it kind of, do you kind of like trip over that a little bit, or is that something that you almost helps you push faster along even?
Less and less, but this is also really a great question, because at the time when I was starting, like it was a problem, and this is what I was trying. I'm not even trying to advertise the course, but I'm trying to say what was my goal and kind of attitude coming into there, because when we start talking, like at the time I didn't have completely uh, clear idea what how much should be included, for example.
Mm.
Usually it's like, or you get the application workflow or you get the pipeline workflow of things. You don't get so much design philosophy on top.
Mm.
So there's a lot of mixed things, because and now I'm trying to give everything a structure. But sometimes even the structure can be overwhelming. For example,
Mm.
some people collect too much. And when you collect too much, then you have to classify all these things, put in all these drawers on the shelves and so on. And then you still nothing's done, because this is just the first step of the process. Like, this is not the goal of the process. But you have to go through all of that as well at some point. But then you also get, I say, influenced by only stuff you've seen, not by the stuff you have experienced. Because if you're only influenced by the stuff you've seen, you're going to recreate the already existing experience.
Mm.
So you have to find the balance. Now I have a kind of reached the stage, and also like for me was uh, was also interesting how to find understanding, because in the theme design we are jumping all over different forms.
Mm.
So what form is perfect? What's the holy grail of
Mm.
industrial design or design in general? What's the perfect car? Like how to dissect there that part of the things, because this is aesthetical, but you are kind of approaching that from the engineering point of view as well. I still believe the cars are designed to look beautiful, because this is like one of the biggest selling points, and for them this is maybe even more important than the drag, the air drag. But
Mhm.
you're not going to be told that, because marketing is pushing the tech. But here's the thing: like, if your company doesn't have uh, a long tradition of producing something, they will be advertising technology.
Mhm.
If they have, then they will be going for this kind of luxury lifestyle thing. So this is also what I've noticed. Like, these old kind of tricks of trade, basically, which are based on now or of our psychology. So like Rolex watch. Rolex watch is now a symbol of something. It's not about measuring time, horology of
Yeah.
things. Even that word, that term, like, you're not going to say watch, you're horological device or whatever.
Yes.
You're going to
Exactly.
celebrate it. So, and this is not bad. I'm not saying this is bad. This is actually cool in a sense, but I think you should understand. So if someone, for example, watch company comes to you and like, let's design this. Or for example, Casio, like G-Shocks, were based on
Mhm.
the quartz mechanism. They were like the the next gen thing at the time they were released, but now they're not. Now it's like kind of funny. Like, Apple is ruling both mobile market in a sense, like of that appraisal, and the watch market almost.
Mhm.
If you're going for the technology part of things. So on the other side, like horology, like they're celebrating mechanism, which can be like make a connection with cars running on fuel, internal combustion engine, and then I can make another connection to the ones back to the camera, because the Terminator design is based on internal combustion engine.
Mm.
So if you kind of dissect things and see why they work, and this is why Terminator in my eyes also, like, it's a machine, and the car is a machine. But the electric car, it's electric motor. It's not really a machine in that sense.
Mhm.
So how to invent? Because you have to come up with certain and distinctive look for every technology which comes by, and this is the kind of point of design. And also, like, what design is it engineering, or is it like styling on top of the hull, basically. So in concept design, we are definitely concentrating on the visual side of things. and this is where the connection with art comes in.
Mm.
So, and yeah, especially for movies, because you're not going to drive, or you're just getting that part of that experience by watching that material. We'll see how the virtual reality side of things will also play out. That was quite interesting, like playing Half-Life Alex, because I played all the titles, so I know I'm familiar with the IP from the get-go, and then I get something completely new on top. So it's the same content, but now it's in the virtual reality. And now I'm getting completely different experience. For me, that was crazy, because when I was playing a new, the first one, Half-Life, that was like I was a kid at the time. So like I don't know, like 14 years old or something like that. So also like it was also had different influence on me in that sense. And then once again, I'm getting hyped, like I'm, you know, getting a little bit of thrills, seeing these, soldiers, combine coming around the corners, throwing some grenades or stuff like that. And then yeah, like everything, like I like that. I like that when design is not dull. you know
Mm.
I like when we can experience stuff. But for example, if you're going to design the next gen combined soldier, what that soldier should look like, because he's a little bit of an insect as well, talking about this IP, which I also find interesting. But there's a human inside. But the alien, but he's like serving the alien kind of side of things. So in that way, the design of the suit and the stuff he's wearing is more closer to the alien side of things, even though there is a human inside. So yeah, now I have understanding of that. When I was playing and when I was like a kid, I didn't have any. I was just like enjoying the moment, basically.
Going back a little bit to what he's talking about in terms of like intention and strategy, and either why things they are or why they potentially exist for the reason that they exist for. In the course, and obviously just conversation with yourself, and even the way you showcase yourself as a brand and as an artist. Marketing is very important to you, or you clearly understand the importance of it. How did that journey begin? Like, when did you kind of get
It's
used
really
to what was
simple.
marketing?
It came from my passion, and also if I don't have anything to say, how I can help others anyhow.
Right.
Then like, and also this is the thing. Subject often mentioned is like how you approach that, like, imposter. You know, like, are you imposter or not? Like, what for example, when I was recording this course, what I have experienced myself, I think I figure it out why people often think about themselves, like if they're imposters, like when they're recording material, because you're hearing your voice, but the voice is coming from a different direction, and that looks fake because it doesn't sound like your voice.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just a moment ago talking about first-hand experience, and now like we can connect this already to that, because I haven't hear anyone defining why this happens. And I believe one of the reasons is actually that, because hearing your own voice but from another direction, another source, you clearly it's not you.
Yeah.
So that makes some sort of like havoc in your head in
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
sense. This is what something realized. So maybe this is one of the reasons why some actors don't like watch their movies they did, because they are used to see life from the first person shooter perspective. So
No, I
even
think
they
that's
were doing the
yeah.
movie like it was done from that
Yeah.
perspective, from based on their experience. So this is how I'll kind of solve this kind of paradigm, if it's about me, like seeing through. But I wouldn't say like on other way, like I'm not really technical person,
Uh-huh.
and creativity and being technical are almost two different things. And I always raise these subject, why scientists are not that creative.
Mm-hmm.
Are they really that powerful then?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is what I don't like about culture. And also, like, artists are usually portrayed are some, poor guys on the corner, doing art, stuff like that. Like Impressionism, like these painters were not famous at the time in a sense as they are now, Now all these paintings are used for the text relief, but at the time that wasn't an option, you know. So that's also another thing why they were doing that. Um, but I think in design, this artistic point of view can become something really, really powerful, because that's maybe science coming in from your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And your intuition can be connected to your subconscious. And we always kind of like to think, or we always say that your subconscious like is more powerful than conscious. Like when you're dreaming, and this is now valid for every person, not just someone like who is like a designer or an artist. Like when you're dreaming, you are making your own movies. So everyone is director when he's sleeping. So how is that possible? You can recreate basically anything you like, but when you wake up, this option is gone. So then, like, yeah, some people take something like to experience that vivid experience, because virtual reality is like also like seen as almost like a drug, not really now, but when these devices become part of you, uh, just as then you will also lose the sense of reality. This is also a dangerous thing, you know because I believe in design, things should be grounded. you know you should catch the right perspective, unless the distortion is not the subject itself. But yeah, you definitely have to ground something to sell something, like otherwise everything's kind of, you know becomes like almost like Inception movie.
Have you always been like that? Like, has using obviously grounding things, has that always kind of been your go-to, or did you have a phase where you were, you know, going wild with things?
I had to sort it for myself before I be able to, like, I mean, my goal wasn't like helping others in a sense. My goal was like to discover
Mm.
myself, like understand myself. This is why I got kind of influenced by history, and but I never ended there, because I didn't want just to replay things for people. And also that'll be interesting if I was like, I was teaching for a year, and that was freaking amazing. And then but the problem was I didn't like the system that much. It was like too linear for my taste. And also, like, for years I needed certain things, but now I don't need these things anymore. So they were important part of me growing up, and to understand things. But now, like, just like a rocket, like first stage, second stage engine, and then you
What did
get
you
rid of
teach?
the. Sorry.
What were you teaching?
It was actually a web design at the
Mm.
time, but it was in a private school. Uh, it was a thing. I had a very couple of classes. I had a thing with discipline, because I wasn't really sure, because I was quite young at the time as well. So I wasn't really sure how to approach things from that point of view.
Mm.
How much I should push, should I even push, or someone. But then I noticed that the most problematic people were kind of the smartest. They only had a problem with authority. So they were questioning my authority, but actually I found out that was for a reason. And actually, in a sense, I almost liked it, because why I should be teaching them if I don't have authority to teach?
Mm.
So this is how I solved it. But it actually got sorted out on its own, because um, I have this passion to talk about certain things. I did show them some ways. And these guys who were actually almost like a problem, they actually came later with the stuff they were doing in their free time based on the stuff I was teaching. That was
Mm.
crazy. I didn't expect that, which happened from the way. But if I went, to them, in a different way, if I clashed with them, then we will become antagonists.
Mm.
That wouldn't sort it for myself and wouldn't sort it for themselves either. So that was a really great experience for me, um, to have from that time. Yeah, certainly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's also like, I guess what they were doing also was kind of searching, maybe subconsciously themselves, like, okay, which method or which way is going to communicate with me so I can understand, as opposed to maybe not just being particularly rebellious or disruptive. And I guess once they did find something that clicked with them, then they were like, okay, fine, it's gotten through. Let's run with it as well. What were you like as an academic? Like, did you have that same kind of experience, or were you a model student?
Um, yeah, well, kind of in between, but I was always in the background in that sense. I
Right.
always kind of like to listen because when someone is smarter than me, I'll rather listen. I'm not, but depends on the group. That's the thing. This is
Mm.
a subject like kind of on toast, like group dynamics.
Mm.
This was the thing when I was like studying at Hyper Island. This is what I learned there. I was expecting it will be just about design, and this is why I have introduced some various topics in this course as well, based on that experience. Because I found out like to be successful in design, you have to know a lot about psychology and the team and so on and so on. Otherwise, you won't be able to complete the mission.
Yeah.
So even though I was only interested in design, in this kind of aesthetics, the kind of movie side of things, like, but being interested in that, you're kind of forgetting the complexity of production behind it. Like even Cameron now is still talking about his relationship with the people on the set and so on. So that was also interesting for me. Some also designers, I believe that was Ben Proctor. Um, like he was also speaking about some other interesting things in his own podcasts, which I find amazing because some people look as a giant and then they come in like more humble and show you the truth side of things. And in that way, they're even bigger
Mm.
in my eyes for certain, showing the true reality of things, how these things happen. Because I'm interested in truth. I'm not interested in this kind of polished version, because I wanna, not because of the drama. I would like to know about technical side of things. What was
Mm.
the issue? What was the problem? Like what's important? Like to know in a sense. And this is what I don't necessarily like about social media now. Even though like I'm political just as everyone else, I don't wanna kind of push that noise, because I believe some subjects could be covered through through them on, like without really speaking what I like and what I don't like. It's up to you, like to make your own choices. I'll present stuff as better as I can, and then it's up to you, like what you're going to pick up. And this is what I want, because I don't want, first of all, I don't want to produce any clones like many people does. So often we also see the case, talking not just you but also the audience, like you find a style and then you kind of cater that field, or and then everyone else starts to imitate that, which is fine if this is the goal. But if wasn't your personal goal, maybe you should find your own voice. Because talking about voice, we all have certain voice. Like we don't have, we have the based device to authorize something based on the voice authorization. So it should work the same way in your field as well. In that way, you'll become irreplaceable because you had your own voice. But if you're imitating, you will be replaced by that person you are imitating, or other person which is also imitator as well. So how is that working for you? And
Mm.
also, like our abilities are not the same, which is actually good, because I had to overcome my disabilities in some areas, and there's still many. But at
Mhm.
least I understand that I'm not that good in this field, so I will work with other guys who are way better, instead of like pushing my ego, like I have to like put the signature on top of everything in a sense. Um, Yeah, definitely. So I have interesting conversations in my head with myself as well. Yeah.
Sick. But with that said, though, like your work like has a distinct look and feel. It is clearly yours. Um, did you too go for that same kind of like journey where you at times maybe imitating either just through learning, or was that never an issue for you?
I believe that was more like inclining to the standard, or also redefining some of the standards. Um, for example, how to explain this in a best possible way. Um, yeah, like for me, as I'm now meshing standard, this is also something I had to kind of realize on my own. Like, what's the standard? What's the original work? Like for example, what's natural as well, because things in nature can't be patented because they already existed. And apparently, the IP law understands clearly the concept of creator. So we are not coming in with this kind of real religious point of view. We're coming with the concept of creator. Like you could be able to patent nature if you have created anything, if you're God. But considering everyone understands and agrees that they didn't, no one can patent nature. So this is my understanding of the IP law in that sense. And it's kind of interesting. And then we come in that kind of world because we haven't defined also the laws of this world. And we have create something kind of unique in this kind of bubble of things. Maybe some product. And also like what's the definition of the product. Something you use, something you buy. This is also crazy because we don't have products in nature. We have products of nature, I'll say, but not they're not man-made. So and then in the sci-fi, like when they discover a new planet, they're always trying to show what this kind of environment is. Like it always feels like it was created by another god in a sense, almost, isn't it? If it's desolate or barren and so on, like that doesn't feel, it doesn't give you this good feeling, like because the god there almost feels evil, isn't it? So yeah, that was interesting, and I believe that was kind of they were trying to pull that off with Prometheus. So with this kind of atmosphere, and then now we are also why I'm also also speaking about these subjects because I already mentioned the Death Stranding, and Death Stranding is like quite it's sci-fi. How to explain that? Or it's almost like sci-fi version of something a little bit more occult because the side effects are quite evil. This world, like after the war setting, and then we also have this kind of entities. Um, yeah, quite weird concept, but it's like a sci-fi version of the horror, but it's not like based on the horror as a typical horror at all. Like you're how you're experiencing, and what you know about this world is like horrific. That will be in that way. So I definitely like that IP because there's a lot of industrial design there to kind of, because we're also talking about this kind of core concepts of design and what design represents. And in that way, maybe this world was kind of grounded with this industrial design and concept designed by Yoshikawa Yori. Like he's always almost feels like um, Kojima's like secret weapon.
Yeah,
I mean, everyone knows
definitely.
about him for
Sure.
certain. And then he's doing a lot of hardcore industrial designs, but the technique he's using, like it's almost like a water painting. This kind of brush, like it's quite elusive as well. And this is what I like about concept art in general. Like you're not going to define everything. What's elusive, you're like leave room for interpretation. And now coming full circle to the hardcore modeling in Fusion, like this is like everything's set, everything's clear, reflections and so on. And this is like maybe, and if some like it's complete clarity, but filming in 4K or filming in low res can be problematic because now we have all these remasters and we don't like what we see necessarily in 4K because it's too much is revealing. But not for every movie. Alien and Aliens work beautifully in 4K because they all were grounded up in the design. So nothing's wrong there. Like they're even a great reference because they were using practical effects. So you don't have issue. It's the perfect render, The grain is okay, it's less grain, but the render it can be better than what it is. So yeah. Now the thing though with remasters is only in terms of like was it more blue or more brown or whatever. So yeah.
Talk to me about Mother. What's the origin story for that?
I mean, I already mentioned Mother Nature. I have mentioned Alien. Like in Alien, we have this kind of Nostromo main computer, which I truly liked as something kind of that. This is actually when I was also speaking the early on about AI. So this is AI of the mentorship AI system with even more capability on top because maybe this AI could be less if it's just for the ship, but this ship is also giving this kind of infinite answers, um, which in my eyes like were kind of outreaching the service, what this AI was supposed to do. So you can already tell that this is some sort of like almost like edit module in a sense. So even as a standard, it's something on top, So maybe they were not just a mining vessel. I mean, they are, but with that addition, you already know that the company owning that it's something bigger than that. It's not just a truck with AI system, because another interesting thing, Mother is not connected to the internet. So everything is also running locally in a sense. But that sense that you're also approaching that entity as a human and also like a mother, which is like part of your own family, isn't it? Like made also like an impact. But I wouldn't just say I use it for the movie or that. There are different ways. And also like mother is written with number 3. And so I like this kind of um, having like also this option ahead because at the time, now I'm thinking like how it came to be. At the time, I didn't have completely clear concept why I was picking up that name. It was also a little bit of intuition, and I believe every artist has one or works on one. So I picked that one, and also like the logo I did, I'm so satisfied with it still. And at the time I wasn't that really good in designing logos because I didn't really it almost because logo like with the least amount of content you have to say as much as possible. So it's almost like haiku, That's the logo. And if you ask many designers how to define it, they will not know. This is also a funny thing, But for me also like this logo also represents essence of automotive design. You can't draw it perfectly with your hand because this curve is flowing around. It has this kind of curvature like G2, G3, whatever, how you kind of draw it. So it's like a bevel of iPhone. It's just doing a full circle and it's also going inside. And it's also a cell. It's also representing a cell itself. And then we have this kind of R, a small circle around it, which can also represent the core of the cell. The nucleus. So how is that called? And then if you look at creativity and if you look at the infinite space of the white paper, like your universe, you basically almost enclosed a certain area of that paper. And this becomes your universe inside of that. So this my logo also represents in a sense. And was I able to comprehend all of these things at once or wasn't? Like, maybe subconsciously I was able to, but there definitely is the story behind that logo and the mother name itself.
And the work that you create under that kind of like say label, so to speak, um, is this like only linked to that? Like almost has it become a thing on its own, like taking a life of its own? Like does it dictate more what you create because of what it represents for you, or vice versa?
It can be also looked as a balance because as I was speaking about the logo, this logo is kind of more organic and kind of more feminine. The name is also kind of more feminine.
Mm.
Um, but then in my work, you can see kind of this kind of harsh autistic side of things, completely based.
Mm.
And so maybe in that sense, it's also like some sort of balance between these different realities and how they kind of talking to each other. Because my early phase in modeling was actually it was more organic,
Mm.
also based on the tools. But even though I was doing hard surface design, these shapes were more fluent, more stylized, and so on. But when you're using CAD, you're also getting a little bit more influenced by
Mm.
that stuff. But uh, and then this kind of fluidity and this kind of softness kind of moved to the corners of the forms, and but in that sense, like organically speaking, I was doing some Android designs in ZBrush, and then the natural for the Android, because it's humanoid form, it's like it's softer.
Mm.
The skin is soft as well, so we also have this kind of impression of the touch. And then on the industrial design of things, you're dealing with more utilitarian kind of approach, yeah,
Mm.
because you're making or designing some utilities, and that way they come as some sort of blocks, like blockouts of that function in a sense. So for that will be a better shape. So it's not like I was just under the influence of location. I was also like designing maybe weapons utility inside of those apps, and this is something more organic inside of the ZBrush side of things. But then also like as the clients were also approaching in, they were not so much based on ZBrush mentality because I wasn't like working for Marvel
Mm.
or any of that. So working on the more like products like CAD felt like a better solution, better platform like to deal with these problems. So, and also I really like the idea of this kind of procedural history, for example, being able to change the thing after the something is modeled, which in the art world is also kind of way harder to do. Like when you do a sculpt, you can adjust some things, but yeah, it's not, you can't go to the very first stage. Like you don't have this kind of recorded in that sense. And it's kind of more analog as well. But there are some things talking I would like to mention in industrial design. There are some things which working based on the anatomy of things from this kind of artistic point of view, which is kind of crazy. Like if you were sketching or drawing anatomy, and if you're doing hardcore industrial design, it can still help you quite a lot because its anatomy is coming from the someone else's portfolio,
Hmm.
and he knew what he was doing. So
And before we get, we'll talk course soon, but before we get into that, um, obviously the course heavily features Fusion, formerly known as Fusion 360. But I'm just curious to know your kind of like tool, at least on the 3D side of things, your software journey up until that point. Because I was speaking online, offline, you've used many and had some influence on many as well. But yeah, let us know like what your software journey's been like um before we've settled on future.
The first one from the polygon based, I believe, was Cinema 4D, but soon enough, as soon model became a thing, I jumped over the model. And then Blender happened also.
Right.
As something. Blender to me looked like a model in a sense. Even now you have some
Yeah,
model
I
was
agree.
from Luxology, and now like this software is kind of dead for some strange reason. I would say strange reason because it was quite it came to be from the developers from Lightwave or something like that.
Mm.
Then they split it from the original company and they made their own, like, and then on those things, kind of new standards, this kind of what the standards should be, model came to be. And it was kind of, it had a full pipeline there. You didn't have to use that many um, kind of add-ons as you're now using in Blender, but you had a lot of scripts for different things, and the render everything was quite capable. And some of my early work was actually rendered with model. Now, like you can also get that software for free. I believe license is around for everyone, considering like how is that called, abandoned
Mm.
or something like that. They have released the license, so you can still use it.
Cool.
And I still think uh, there are a couple of ways, interesting ways, that model can be still utilized. Polygon modeling, now I'm doing everything kind of in Blender and rendering there. Keyshot as well. Keyshot was really amazing, and definitely for some hardcore product design illustration. So, but I'll never say what's better. Not because
Sure.
it's kind of politically incorrect. If you're talking to these companies, I would say because everything has its own place, and the best thing, like, and I think I'm right on the subject because you can see some things rendered with Keyshot, some things rendered with Fusion even, and some other stuff rendered with cycles, and I even used Octane inside of the Blender as well. And I find kind of Octane. So this is also interesting. I'm not that technical in terms of renders, and I'm approaching them from the way I kind of experience things when I'm getting results pumped out
Hmm.
after you know I spam the render button. But I find kind of Octane are more atmospheric. Cycles is kind of more cut. I don't know. I wouldn't say cartoonish, but they all have certain atmosphere, and
Mm.
also like technically speaking, the quality of displacement and bump mapping is different in varies, and this fine grain and these fine differences in the texturing settings of the shader are quite giving these different results. So it's not just technical capability of this render, but also shader setup. Because in real life, uh, you have like this Moltec, this kind of industrial textures on the grip of the weapon of some utility or whatever, which actually these patterns are patented. So you pick certain grain, you know what was the size of that grain, these kind of dots, if they're consisted from dots on different patterns, you know exactly what you will get in real life. So that's something cool. And for example, Keyshot has some default presets for that. You know, there are some in Blender as well to deal with that side of things, but there are no default presets. For example, because Keyshot is also trying to accommodate like industrial design community, because it was kind of more intended. But on the other hand, like Blender is like full pipeline, visual effects, compositing, stuff like that.
Mm.
So Keyshot is like you rent a photo studio, from my point of view. Like you already coming with all this equipment, everything's kind of there.
Yep.
From the default, you pull in things you want to shoot, and you're just using it. With Blender comes kind of more experience, more expertise, and so on. So when I was also like working on the Blender side of things inside of the course, I was also like thinking how I should be using that as well, what I'm going to show, what not, because it's incredibly complex. On the other
Mm.
side of things, with Dairin, 3D, like my co-developer, because like I'm was leading things more from the ideas, like, and then he was like uh, developing all these solutions in code in terms of like add-ons.
Mm.
I'm also like doing on the side. So for example, now we're including XDecal is now excluded inside of the course. I don't know like if someone else already did something similar, but I was using decal system inside of the Blender because I didn't want, even though I'm unwrapping some things and showing a little bit of that, like I wanted to keep things on the side of the concept design. And the
Mm.
problem with unwrapping is that you unwrap everything and then you can't go back and change things. But I can move the decal on top. I just change things on the shader
Mm.
way and change geometry, apply the same shader on that new geometry, and then I just pull left and right the decal I want to see on maybe different place, because I'm concept designer. Like this is not completely finished. It's not the game model.
Mm.
And this kind of rational part of the things can be always done by someone else. Because yeah, if the concept is like defined properly.
And Fusion, um, obviously you're partnered with Autodesk for Fusion. How did that come about?
Yeah, as I was like going, I mean, like I have like 15K followers on Instagram for quite some time, and then like I noticed my works were shared, and then I was kind of looking around also like people with a similar kind of I say portfolios, ideas. So I met like Jonathan Odom and Kejingson, like who were like already part of the Autodesk, but I already met them on Instagram side of things.
Right.
And so this came to be, and as I was naturally using also Fusion, and also Fusion at the time was in terms of licenses was also completely free. I believe
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't that much restricted. I'm also mentioning that now because some people were thinking like, if they don't have, can they use this course like basics with a hobbyist? And I think they can, because restrictions come when you're in kind of more manufacturing environment of things, and then becomes more serious and more business savvy, which is completely fine. But I believe Fusion is quite amazing for what it offers on this limited licenses just as well,
Mm.
especially because modeling is kind of more standardized. Like you can't really I say restrict mirroring or some certain features, timelines should be working, all this stuff. So it's more around cam manufacturing and some yeah. And also Autodesk is now way more social than it was before, and they have also reached out quite a lot on their own. And my also interested was also like to give some feedback to them.
Mm-hmm.
So this is also what I like to do in terms of software, like I'm using to maybe close some bugs or maybe explore some my own workflows, because if some stuff is more intended for manufacturing, how like for example entertainment designers are using it, so if the development team is aware of that, like they can do certain changes, because I believe at the end everyone will be benefit. For example, in terms of asset management, asset management will apply to everyone involved, doesn't matter like to what side of design field you are leaning to. So because in terms of structure, we all have the same problem, how to manage stuff, how to keep it, properly, these folders in the cloud or whatever, and how and then how to find them, to pull them in. That's definitely, I think the asset management was for years and years like kind of disregarded, especially for the design. And this course, like as I was working on the dropship, like I could just pull out a piece of that dropship and just work on that. As I was working on, this is like full-fledged design on its own, like
Mm.
just to work on the thruster part of the engine or the grills, just like you have the grills on Ferrari, for the cooling the engine and so on. There's so many intricate details. In terms of details, I'm maybe even going on kind of um, filleting sometimes stuff too much because I'm using CAD in a certain way. I'm sometimes using it also for presentation. So
Mm.
for manufacturing, you won't be coming in with all those fillets, all these details, because some fillets in real life are coming from the mold.
Mm.
Like you'll be defined through manufacturing, and in real life you don't get this kind of sharp edges anyhow. So
Mm.
they all get kind of dealt with. So yeah, so it's also different. Like, are you producing for the digital arena or for the real life? So this is why some kind of real stuff actually looks quite unrefined in 3D and
Mm-hmm.
maybe even disappointing or even simplified. You know, maybe some mechanism, which is actually good because that project is coming in lighter. It doesn't come in with all these unnecessary details from their point of view. So kind of like that. So I'll definitely learn quite a lot from this kind of creator community of things, like all the stuff which are shared inside of there, and had the opportunity to use some kind of versions of Fusion before they were kind of public, because some
Mm.
things were also tested, so they couldn't be released because they could be kind of breaking the workflow. So it's not always the best thing to work on the very new iteration of the application as it sounds, because it can break some stuff. So yeah, so that was definitely interesting. And yeah, and years as we were talking, I was just hanging out in the Luxology forum just as well. So this is a project I'm like a bit sentimental, so I did mention it because it's quite rare to have something that mature and it could still die. Like for example, a soft image was also like a big thing, like I believe Italy, Bulgaria, we're still using it, which is quite cool. And then Blender was quite interesting because Blender was the way they did the user interface and how you were able to split up the windows. That was something I kind of found familiar first time I've seen Softimage, and
Mm.
that's the tool I never managed to learn.
Right.
So that was my failure at the time, as something wasn't like clicking right. But I don't find that it was a problem of Softimage. Something was like, uh, I mean, at the time we could rarely find a really good tutorials online, and the internet was slow on its own.
Mm.
So that was the limits. So now, like, you are basically limitless. I think now you only have to be careful to whom you are listening to, and to come up with some healthy habits and the discipline to do things. Um, and definitely enjoy the process. This is quite important, because when you're enjoying something, then you're more relaxed. When you're more relaxed, then you're more creative. And and when you're working under stress, under certain deadlines, this can be a good thing if you get used to it. So through that, next time it won't be stressful anymore. It will just become part of you. But coming through first time through this process can be definitely exhausting, because you're
Mm.
thinking about stuff like you're not thinking how to ride a bicycle, but the first time you were riding a bicycle definitely wasn't a major success,
Yeah.
So
So the two courses, Fusion Basics and Concept Design in Fusion, what can people expect from either of those courses?
in Fusion, for example, basics, I'm already showing quite a lot how I sketch, and in parallel with history, procedural history already mentioned, uh, in parallel with the timeline, which represents the history of things, so you can go back and forth.
Mm.
Uh, I like when I make a sketch, so I can make this kind of adjustments. And in terms of that, I'm using like constraints. So basically, this to me like looked like rocket science the first time I was kind of picking that out. And usually people like to have this all freedom, but now I kind of prefer like I'm certain that this line in sketch is parallel to that line, and
Mm.
so on and so on. And then when I extrude the model out of this and I come back once again to the sketch, if I just change the some corner because I defined the degree for that corner, so maybe my design will keep some, you know, secret code like all corners of that range like a 30, 30, 60 degrees, you know, they're all divided by 3 and so on. You know, I kind of like this
Mm.
idea to make things kind of more procedural, also like in aesthetical, and also come up with some sort of solution, which also is parallel with my graphic design thinking, because in graphic design, you're working with grids, and grids is it's important part of the DTRAM design thinking. Everything's kind of 90-degree linear, but in industrial design, I prefer to use kind of angles, you know,
Mm.
so less 90-degree stuff, you know. But for the brown products, that's perfect. So in Fusion is like perfect for that. There's some stuff like their full-fledged application is Alias for the automotive design, and then you have all this freedom. I don't know Alias. I I think it's amazing, but in a way, I'm almost like how I say, I'm almost missing the restrictions of the grid in a sense, you know. And
Mm.
sometimes, like if something's overly more complex and more kind of fluent, doesn't necessarily mean it will be better,
Mm.
because also depends on the application. So Fusion in those eyes, like it's actually perfect for me what I expect. But then we still have freeform modeling inside of the Fusion, which I'm showing a little bit as well, even though like I haven't fully grasped. So this is basically subdivision side of the CAD modeling. So you can make some completely organic surfaces. And this is like kind of perfect for this kind of prototyping in this kind of 3D space and dimension to find some people usually can use that for making some helicopter hulls or aircraft hulls and stuff which are
Mm.
completely organic, you know. Or you can generate this from the lofts and some other stuff. But I believe just working sketch from this kind of side profiles or the work plane profile. So depending on the part of the model where you click, the sketch appears and then you sketch on top of that. That was like more than good enough, because this is in all complexity of things of 3D perspective, this simple stuff like still make things like incredibly complex, because like in graphic design, just to make sure to explaining great in graphic design, we only deal with one top plane or front plane,
Mm.
whatever. It's just one plane. It's already complex, isn't it? So how much from on top of that I truly need for the 3D industrial design?
Mhm.
So maybe I need more control than capability
Mm.
in a sense, and I need good asset management. This is something I kind of like, and also like Fusion. Kind of no one is talking about rendering, and this pre-visualizing Fusion was quite beneficial for me, because I didn't have to leave the Fusion that much to export all that stuff. I could already see how things were looking in the viewport.
Mm.
And for some strange reason, even though nowadays people still prefer the render, I almost prefer the viewport. Uh,
Me too. Yeah, I think it's also.
yeah, like it's so super clean, you know, the
Yes.
lines, everything's kind of so. Renders for me are more a thing about immersion
Mm-hmm.
and the use of the product in that sense. So yeah, this is how I can kind of approach it now, as you're asking me. You know, if something else pops up, maybe I'll come up with some other, ideas and thinking about something, because we all also constantly change. We're also getting older, so as well.
And thing about Fusion Basics is, so I've used Fusion for many years. I've had spent a lot of hours in there and very comfortable with it. But it was very refreshing to see the way you deploy it, because I probably use like about a very small percentage of what's available there. And even though like obviously this is still on the, for concept design and design kind of like side of things, it's very thorough and it's very detailed, and it is a very nice, almost like, I'm not putting a disservice to it, like a manual of how to use this program. But at the same time, it's not just purely like a step by step. You're designing something, and one of those things that you design is this very cool functioning crate. And looking at it initially, when I first thought, okay, that's cool, but then I start seeing it open and moving and hinges and all that kind of stuff, and the way you test the design and show that it works in obviously, like, from a digital perspective, but clearly if you were to print this out or manufacture it, it'd still work in that way as well. It was very cool to see. But also, this is a object that features in concept design in Fusion, which is for the overall dropship, which again also blew my mind, because from the outside you see the dropship and it looks amazing, and then the detail just keeps going and going and going until you end up inside the actual dropship itself, and that's before we even get to Blender and make it fully immersive. So give us a kind of like take on your process and what you want to get across with concept design in Fusion.
There's some things I actually had to kind of do differently for the course. Not so much from my own workload, but in a sense, I was also recording everything. But then I wasn't like doing really any true sketches in a sense as they're usually done. So a lot of that was actually happening in the process of things. I still came in with a with kind of idea what will be the size of the thing, even though necessarily, what's first, like chicken or the egg, should you start with the units, or should you start, I mean, because like you can start from the human centric point of view, so building everything around the human, or you're starting from the aesthetical point of view, so the human is inside but it's not necessarily functional, so entertainment design maybe, in Avatar is both, because the guy is placed in the practical effect. It has to work both ways. So the truth is in between, So it depends what your goals are. But when I was doing a dropship, some stuff is definitely based on reality of things, Even though the dropship itself of that size and, completely based on the thruster tech, it's not here yet for sure, because like rockets have thrusters, but you have to replace it. Everything like it's just one or back and forth trip. So yeah, definitely. So that's definitely interesting in that sense, because and then but I think we can still approach things from a traditional package point of view, like you can learn from automotive design. You place you have that kind of diagram of passengers, engine compartment, or batteries, because now it's more about batteries than engine in this with electric cars, because the battery is almost bigger part, or at least heavier part of the vehicle. Also depends on what kind of electric engine does it have, I mean, electric motor, sorry, not engine. We all know what the engine is. But so that's also interesting, because I'm also putting stuff on kind of traditional placement. Let's put it like that. But there's some other innovation in terms of like the door is on front, But in terms of how this craft is used, like makes perfect sense, Maybe in VTOL, like it's a VTOL design, because which means like it can vertically lift and land. Still, the engines are or on the hull of things, because I wanted to make the hull kind of something cohesive, which also we have in mind with additional cars. You don't have cars with the parts uh, around them, like
Mm-hmm.
everything's kind of one big form, but still there's so much room for interpretation of that box because car can be looked as a box. The passengers are boxed in, but then if you're doing helicopter or craft design, you have a cockpit. In the car, you don't really have a cockpit, but you have in Formula. So maybe Formula in that sense have more connection with flying stuff than actual cars in a
Mm-hmm.
sense,
Mm-hmm.
from the point of human centric point of view, how things and are built around it, because everything has to be like close enough so you can use it like no way to reach back or whatever, so yeah, this also made me thinking, and this is why I think we shouldn't idolize anything, because if you're idolizing something, you're not going to change it necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're or you're not going to dissect it in a primal language, primal elements as they are, and then you will assemble something else. um, so in fusion, like, maybe some of that stuff is kind of simple and technical, but talking about constraints, and as I was talking about ergonomics, like if you make a person fit inside and then you build things around it, this is also one way of doing it. Or you make the form, you find. Then in the course is also the question what forms are beautiful in a sense and why. Uh, so we definitely start with the philosophy before we come in fusion, like, because I wanted people have some idea and some other expressions of the design, some extremes even, you know because fusion is just an application. Like, if you don't know how to draw, like, what like the pen wouldn't help you anyhow,
Mm-hmm.
you will still have to have some idea how to fulfill that white paper. And sometimes I had a problem with drawing because I truly admired this pureness of the paper, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to kill it.
Yeah.
So this is my autistic side of things,
Right.
which I don't necessarily like, because they can also, as I'm saying, like, put you on the wrong side of things in terms of like pursuing something you shouldn't.
Mm.
So now I'm kind of thinking like, what are my constraints? Because this happens when you're encountering a problem. Because when we're encountering the problem, we are zooming in, and when you zoom in, you don't you're losing the overview. So yeah,
Mm.
and I hope that with the fusion basics, I already gave a good overview of things and how I'm using it to accomplish something. So that was my primary goal in difference, because I mentioned fusion how many times now, but I'm not fusion evangelist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that word, because um, I'm not like celebrating. I'm celebrating design in a sense. Like, fusion is just a tool, but it's not just every tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's the tool what makes my dreams real, because that's the clarity of industrial design. Like, these dreams are fully realized in a
Mm.
sense, especially now with 3D printers on your disposal, which is also a thing which happened on the course of years. Uh, because I did start at a time you couldn't use you didn't have any 3D printers, so you could
Mm.
only manufacture it, and then, like, we all know, like, this involves like or building from some maybe paper model or some stuff. This is something I didn't like myself, like doing prototypes, but this is just my personal. Maybe I was just lazy, because the thing was I could already see all the reflections I needed inside of the application. even though like this almost is sacrilege in automotive design, they need a proper model, uh, done, and to see how it truly reacts to life uh, conditions, and so on and so on. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see the feedback on this. I definitely would like to hear the feedback of people like who went through the course just as well.
And just to touch upon what you mentioned about the early lessons in the course, which is not only just on philosophy, but it's a great meditation and explanation of design, of how it's implemented, and not only in terms of just like design in terms of like it's like as a subject matter, like how to use it as a professional, how to be a professional. And again, it's not in a way where it's like this is how you should be professional, but you also highlight different dynamics. And it's great because it gives people almost like different doors to kind of walk through. Oh, that fits my profile. Oh, let's go with that direction. I fit on that one. Let's go with that direction. Obviously, with the design of the course as well, how you build the dropship, and it's incredibly thorough. Like the way that the events and the air intakes and all these kind of things, and the way you narrate yourself as you kind of make them, and especially like what it's related to. Like there's a moment where you liken an element to a diffuser on a sports car, and how that kind of influences things and influences the design, and obviously how you incorporate that as well. But then also how you bring it to life. And what I mean by that is obviously when you're making things in Fusion, one of the cool things about it is it's usually intended to be brought to life, as in either through a print or through manufacturing. Um, but in this case, it's through Blender, and how you shade it, how you make it immersive as well. Like we almost go from hardcore design philosophy, all the way through to VFX. So why did you go to those lengths to bring the design to life as a render? Why not just stop after Fusion?
I mean, in terms of like renders and when you're publishing stuff in your portfolio, just to cover this last stage, was you can, for me, the render is not just the last one. It's also like a blueprint. Then we have maybe viewport screenshot or whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
viewport render, real time one in that sense. Then we have kind of studio render, which is taken out without the environment. And then you have render with environments. So you have all these kind of different experiences of the very same product. And each one is valuable in one way. So I wanted to cover that full range of emotion in that sense. And this is how I relate to things. And I'm not that much speaking publicly what other than podcast in dialogue, or when I'm like discussing something like what design should be. But I hope that this is all spoken through my stuff I'm pushing, like as a designer, because that's my primary tool of communication. And this is how I like approach design. Like I also communicate through it as well. And it's not just my communication, it's also how people relate to something, how they are enjoying something. And this is something I liked about automotive design, because I believe usually when people talk about automotive, they think they talk about cars, not necessarily. They're talking about this kind of modern sculptures which are moving in a certain direction. They are admiring the form. It's not just and this kind of expression of that form, and this is what I truly dig. This is something where if it's about petrolheads, I don't think I'll be mentioning automotive design at all. And also what's the evolution of car, how it came to be, just like with this kind of dropship. I was trying to connect things because it's certain applications, certain mechanism. You don't have to necessarily, how I say, innovate completely everything. I think it's like if you connect the right things together and put in that certain package, uh, that's perfect enough almost, you know. Uh, and in car design, I believe we have kind of, from my point of view, I'll say my point of view, because listening some other car designers, listening to um, also other designers, you'll get completely different point of view, which is great. Uh, like there are a couple of different ways we are now heading, you know,
Mm.
also depending on technology, because now everyone, for example, the problems like we are dealing in this course, these problems are not just existing in this course, they're existing in general in the industry. What the look of the next car should be. I'm all the time asking the same question, like when I was modeling that. Maybe it's in the shape of the dropship, but maybe it's something else, you know, in that sense. Because form and the style, the stylization you take on top of that form can be applied to something else just as well. Because this is what I don't necessarily want. Like the purpose of the course is not to replicate the dropship design. It's to learn like what the process for me was, how I was coming up with some solutions, and so on and so on. Like replication is not necessarily that. Like this is why I was doing something kind of completely unique, and why I wasn't like replicating already existing something.
Mhm.
And this is also how I approached 3D, because at the time I could use photography or I could go 3D way. I went for
Mm.
the 3D because my goal was from the get go to come up with my own design solutions instead of just replicating something which already exists in life. So in my portfolio, you wouldn't see any of that. It's like coming up with with new visual kind of conclusions. Something people, and then people get hyped, you know, because it's they don't hype by my work. They get hype about some new possible future, and some possible outcome, you know. And in that way, this life also becomes more exciting, isn't it?
Mm.
So this is what I like about it. And this is what like I adore, like speaking with other designers and artists, like sharing the ideas and so on. It's not just about me. Like it's this whole kind of conversation. Like and this is how you get hooked on design. And
Mm.
this is why I never thought doing anything else. The history part helped me because this is like the human knowledge in the
Mm.
timeline of things.
Mm.
So that helped me like to understand how they're coming up with solutions for the time, you know, technical as well, you know. As we still don't know like how the Greek fire is made,
Mm.
for example, you know, and on the water was kind of burning even hotter or more
Mm.
than in general. So there are some things which are still, you know, locked in the past. So you'll think like it's always way forward, not necessarily. Like
Mm.
sometimes you definitely do a step backwards, you know. Um, I'm not going to say anything about the new Jag, but some people don't like the new look because they're breaking away from tradition and then they're trying to come. I understand what's going on actually.
Mm.
For me, that design was their not marketing strategy, the company turn, you know. They wanted to turn it into a new direction, simple as that.
Mhm. Mm.
And now we can discuss, was this the right move or not? That's completely different subject, you know. But I believe they wanted to become a tech company from automotive company. And this deciphers the change, because now like maybe they even said publicly, I'm not really sure, that they were only going to do electric cars. So this is a completely breakaway. So this new change in design already shows, already communicates that, even
Mm.
without them saying that,
Yep.
because the change in design was such a big move, you know, in completely different direction. And does it for the better or the worse? That's something else, you know. So this is how I'm looking at it. But to myself, for from the perspective also from the entertainment design or concept design, the look is still traditional.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also matters, For the movie, it still looks like a car if it's alien car, Like how to cope with that? To make another parallel where the cars are part of the universe is like in Elysium. You see the Bentley space or
Mm-hmm.
whatever that was, and how they were celebrating. If you have noticed, like this car, corporate car, it wasn't like looking really corporate. It looks more like a, almost like fashion expression,
Mm.
you know, uh, custom order, and
Yes.
everything else was manufactured, you know. So the poor class or the lesser class was getting stuff like of lesser quality, mass manufactured, and the guy on top, he was getting something done custom, because even though he was like owning the factory, some pieces there almost felt like they were like uh, can I say manufactured in by hand,
Mm.
like handmade, like stitching on the
Mm-hmm.
inside of the car and so on. So definitely someone who was working, I know like specifically now, I could see they have communicated that because I could see that in design. So that was clear. People experienced the movie, didn't think about that rationally, but they were still experiencing these things like as something natural, you
Mm.
know. So if you make a mistake in that visual communication, you will break their immersion inside of that movie in that sense. So this is how I'm also looking. And this is, I believe it's important to balance all these things because now in the reality of things, the reality doesn't care like what side of things you are because everything kind of converges there. So you only have to be right. Your point of view has to be like there, that's it. And this is what I was expecting from myself, doing various things, and yeah, and through that process I'm actually discovering who I am. Like otherwise I wouldn't understand myself, why I need something, why I love something, for certain. When I was growing up, definitely when I was young, like I didn't have any of those answers. That's definitely a key point.
Sure.
And this is also like why sometimes like discussing things almost like too wide, because I want to give that information to everyone, because if everyone gets it, like everything gets better just as well,
Mm.
because like as much as you only capable to zoom in on certain things. Everything else has to be done by someone else. So I'm not definitely trying to be control freak, in that sense. And games are interesting, Games are interesting, like because the group dynamics for teams still work, like as they're working maybe for some, serious business. I mean, it's serious, but it's based on entertainment, so it doesn't look like that serious from the get go as some car itself, And also, like in that industry, things also change quite a lot. For example, in China, what their production cycle is. That's crazy. Like maybe on the Western side of things, will be produced in like a couple of years, depending on the type of the car, the company itself, they're created, because not all companies are created equal. But in China, like it's completely different mindset. They're Russian, but they also have quite a lot of designers from the West, which is also interesting. Uh, they are picking up on some cultural differences. Let's put it like that. Because culture is definitely rooted inside of the design quite heavily and
Mm.
historically. Because if you think what the car was, this can be also constricting what this car could be.
Mm.
I think the technology itself is the biggest influence of the change in the look of the cars still.
Mm.
despite of that knowledge, because the companies are not often inclined to change the look of something, because this is also like part of their brand, and changing something like too dramatically can also make it like too much, because like you're like brainwashed, in a kind of sense. If we are looking negatively for certain time, so they're not going to do a certain change on that car, but like, are you really brainwashed because someone's really picking up that look, so someone is really into that. So yeah, that's the thing with old timers, because cars, for example, before, they were all parallel to the ground, and now everything is coming with the angle, and they are like sitting still, so how to explain that? Sid Mead was actually talking about that, so instead of like just portraying this as my own like idea. And then looking at his design, I believe, like, he was true industrial designer, and still I haven't heard him like presenting himself like too much as industrial designer. It was more like a futurist, which was actually coming more towards the artistic point of view. And his designs were um had this kind of certain, and I wouldn't say art deco, but they had certain artistic expressions to the elements. But then he was hardcore industrial designer, still everything had a perfect use. uh, I really like the aura of that time when he was living, of the kind of that culture. But still, I mean, I'm from Europe and he's American, and so it's still different, a little bit different mindset, in terms of some stylizations and some, for example, there's some other less famous stuff he did. A work, I believe, for Gundam, because I believe the Gundam IP was trying to penetrate American market. So apparently, if I'm not pushing the false information, but this is my interpretation, what I read about it, is that they hired a familiar face for that market, apparently, to help with the IP, I believe. And then, like, his designs over the Gundam or that stuff, or was it Makers? I'm not. Was like really, really interesting.
Yeah, we can. So Ivan, it's time to wrap up. Before we head off, a message from yourself to the students. What do they need to bring with them, whether it's a mentality thing or even something to prepare for, before they take your courses, and also what would you like to see from them once they've taken the course?
Yeah, that's definitely a good one. I would like to see some of my methods like battle tested in their portfolio side of things. And I would really like to not just see and pick up my workflow, and also like see, like, can they come up with some their own solutions in terms of that. They'll be also interesting, because there's always room for interpretation. This is also the goal of the course, like to kind of understand that side of the modeling, because if you look all these possibilities, even when things are quite restricted, you have immense amount of possibilities on your disposal. So I would like them. I would like to see them using those possibilities, like what they think. So if I kickstarted their way of thinking, like, can I come up some new ways of dealing and coming up with some new forms as a result of that process, and also show some control over the process just as well, because that can also define some new future for them too. Because I too much often see like the clones of the already done work, so I don't find that much as exciting in that sense. And I truly believe that every person has their own voice, and yeah, like Fusion is like a perfect playing ground for that.
Perfect. Ivan, it's been incredible. Thanks so much for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Cheers.
A huge thanks to Ivan for that amazing episode. Hit the links attached to learn from him today and take concept design in Fusion. Remember, it also includes Fusion Basics, which can be purchased separately if that's all you're looking for. Then when you're done, be sure to check out Ivan's work and to see what else he's up to. I've been your host, Aaron Danda. Till next time.